The alien girl sat in silence, locked behind a glowing blue force field. Everyone on the space station called her a monster. They said she once destroyed an entire ship with only her scream. They said her eyes could paralyze, and her claws could cut through steel, but no one had seen her move in weeks. She just sat there, still and cold, like a forgotten statue. Guards watched her from a distance. Never going close, scientists studied her through glass, pressing buttons and recording notes. They gave her no name, just a number, subject 47. She didn't speak, didn't eat, didn't respond to any of them until the human arrived. His name was Ethan. He was not a soldier or a scientist. He was just an engineer, sent to check the life support systems. He didn't expect to find her there. He paused when he saw her sitting alone behind the cage. Her silver hair flowed down her back, tangled and dirty. Her skin was dark violet, glowing faintly under the lights. Her golden eyes stared at nothing, empty and tired. She's the monster everyone fears. Someone whispered behind him, "Don't look too long. She might sense it." But Ethan didn't look away. He felt something strange, not fear, but curiosity. Something in her eyes reminded him of sadness, not danger. Why is she in a cage? Ethan asked. She's dangerous, the guard said. Get your job done and stay away. But the next day, Ethan came back. He brought a small meal and left it near the edge of the force field. He didn't say anything, just placed it gently and left. The meal stayed untouched for hours. Then just before the lights dimmed, a clawed hand reached out and pulled it in. The next day, Ethan brought food again, this time warm soup in a sealed container. Again, he left it and walked away. This continued for 5 days. And on the 6th day, something changed. As he set down the food, he heard a sound, a whisper, soft and broken. Why? The voice asked. Ethan froze, turning slowly. She was standing now, closer to the barrier. Why are you feeding me? She asked again. Her voice was gentle, not what he expected. He smiled a little. Because no one else does. She looked confused, like she had never heard kindness before. They fear me, she said. Do you? Ethan shook his head. Not really, for the first time. Her lips moved into something close to a smile, not sharp or cruel, but soft and unsure. It faded quickly. But Ethan saw it. She sat down again, her eyes still on him. Over the next few days they spoke in short words. He asked her name, but she said she didn't have one anymore. Subject 47, she whispered. That's all they call me. That's not a name, Ethan replied. You deserve a real name. She looked surprised, maybe even hopeful. He started calling her Nova, because her eyes reminded him of a star. At first, she didn't respond, but one night, when he was leaving, she said quietly, "Good night, Ethan." The guards noticed the change. They started watching Ethan closely. Don't get too close, they warned. She's playing with your mind. But Ethan didn't believe it. He saw something in Nova no one else did. Not a weapon, not a monster, but someone broken and lonely. One evening, he sat near the cage longer than usual. They talked about space, about silence, about fear. Nova said she didn't remember much. Before the war, she remembered pain, chains, screaming, and cold experiments. I wasn't always like this, she said. They made me this way. Ethan felt anger in his chest. Not at her, but at the people who used her. He placed his hand gently near the force field. To his shock, Nova stepped closer, slowly. She raised her own hand. Their fingers nearly touched, only the blue light between them. Then something incredible happened. The force field flickered, just for a second, and in that second, her claw touched his hand. No pain, no burning, just warmth. Alarms screamed through the room. Guards rushed in, shouting, pointing weapons. Nova stepped back, hands raised. Afraid, Ethan stood between them and her, yelling, "Stop!" She didn't do anything. But they didn't listen. Red lights flashed, guns pointed, and Nova's eyes filled with fear. Not rage, not hate, fear, like a cornered animal. And in that moment, Ethan knew She wasn't the monster they feared. She was the victim they never tried to understand. Asterisk, the alarms kept screaming as the guards surrounded the cage. Nova backed away, her glowing eyes wide with panic. She pressed her back against the far wall, trying to look small. The lights above flickered red, casting sharp shadows across her face. Ethan stood in front of her, his arms out, trying to protect her from the rifles aimed at her chest. "She didn't do anything," he shouted again, his voice shaking but firm. One of the officers barked back. "Step aside." She breached the barrier. "It was an accident," Ethan replied. "The system flickered. I saw it, or she made it flicker." The officer said, "Now move." Ethan didn't move, and behind him, Nova lowered her head and whispered, "I didn't mean to hurt anyone." That whisper stopped everyone. Even the guards paused for a second. The monster had spoken, not with rage, but with guilt. The commander narrowed his eyes, then signaled for the guards to lower their weapons. "Stand down for now," he said, watching Nova carefully. They didn't trust her, not yet, but they didn't shoot either. Ethan finally breathed again as the lights returned to normal. Nova sank to the ground, her arms wrapped around her knees. Later that night, Ethan was ordered to report to the lead scientist. The lab was cold, full of glowing tubes and buzzing monitors. The scientist, a tall alien with dark blue skin and metal implants, stared at Ethan like a puzzle. "You touched her," he said, tapping on his data pad. "And you're not dead." Ethan nodded. "She didn't hurt me. No burns, no damage, no psychic shock." The scientist muttered, more to himself than to Ethan. "She's not what you think," Ethan said. "She's not a monster." The scientist chuckled without humor. "You're not the first fool to say that, but maybe," he added, "you'll be the first to prove it." They allowed Ethan more access to her cell, but now cameras followed his every move. He didn't care, as long as he could still speak to her. He found Nova sitting quietly in the corner, her silver hair glowing under the soft lights. She didn't look up at first, just whispered, "You should stop coming. They'll hurt you." "I'm not afraid," Ethan said, sitting cross-legged on the other side of the barrier. She looked up then, her eyes glowing faintly gold again. "I've never met someone like you," she said softly. "You don't scream when you see me. You're not scary," he smiled. "Not to me." She blinked, then asked something strange. "Why do you call me Nova?" "Because stars shine even in the dark," he replied. "And you've been trapped in darkness too long." Her lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. She reached toward the barrier again. Slowly, Ethan did the same, their fingers almost touching. The force field hummed, but didn't flicker this time. She didn't speak for a moment, then asked, "What do you see when you look at me?" Ethan tilted his head. "I see someone who's lonely, who's scared, but strong. No claws, no fangs." She asked, surprised. "I see those too," he said gently. "But they're not who you are." She pulled her hand back slowly, confused and quiet. A few days passed like this. Quiet moments, small words. The scientists studied their interactions, taking notes and running tests. They asked Ethan to report everything she said, every movement she made. He agreed on one condition. "No torture, no more shocks or threats," he said firmly. "If I help, you treat her like a person." The lead scientist laughed again, but agreed. Behind the glass, Nova listened, though they didn't know it. She never forgot the kindness he showed. One day, Ethan brought something small, a tiny broken toy drone. He showed her how it moved, how it used to fly. Nova watched with childlike interest, eyes focused on the pieces. "Can I fix it?" she asked shyly. He handed it over through a pass slot. "Go ahead." She took it with care, her claws delicate as she examined the wires. In under 10 minutes, it floated again, buzzing weakly through the air. Ethan stared, surprised. "You're amazing." Nova looked down. "I used to fix things before they broke me." That night, while reviewing the footage, the scientist leaned back in his chair. "There's something different about her now," he said quietly. "Something's waking up, but someone else was watching too, a military official with a grim face. "She's dangerous," he said. "And the human's getting too close." Inside the cell, Nova stared at her reflection in the glass wall for the first time in years. She didn't look like a monster to herself. She looked like someone who might still be worth saving. And in the darkness of the station, as silence returned, she whispered Ethan's name, not as a warning, not with fear, but with something softer, something new, and she closed her eyes, wondering what it meant to feel hope again. The door hissed open at midnight, and Ethan slipped inside the observation chamber like a shadow. He wasn't supposed to be there. Not at that hour, not without clearance. But something in his chest felt heavy all day, like Nova's silence earlier. Had meaning behind it. She hadn't spoken. Hadn't even looked at him when he delivered her meal. That had never happened since she first said his name. So now he stood in front of her dim cell, quiet, watching her curled up in the corner. The lights were low, her body barely glowing, her silver hair spread across the floor like threads of ice. She looked smaller tonight, like the cage had grown and swallowed her whole. "Nova," Ethan said softly, pressing his hand to the glass. No response. He tried again, louder this time. "Nova, talk to me." Still nothing. Only the faint buzz of the force field answered him. He sat down slowly, sliding his back against the wall. "I read some of your file," he whispered. "Not all of it, but enough to know they lied." That made her twitch, just a little. "They said you attacked first," Ethan continued. "But the logs say they ran tests on you, tried to control your mind, your body." Nova didn't move, but her tail coiled tighter around her ankles. "They made you into something you were never meant to be," he said, and then locked you up when you fought back. There was a long silence, then the sound of her breath. "Slow and sharp, they made me hurt people," she whispered. "I still see their faces when I close my eyes." Her voice cracked like something was breaking inside her. Ethan looked up, pain flashing in his eyes. "You didn't choose that." "Nova," he said, "you didn't ask for any of it." She finally turned her head toward him, her golden eyes full of pain. "They made me a weapon," she said. "But you treat me like I'm more than that." Ethan didn't reply. He just placed his palm near the glass again. Nova hesitated, then slowly crawled toward him. Her claws clicked gently against the floor as she moved. She stopped right in front of the barrier, inches away from him. "I dreamed last night," she said softly. "I dreamed I wasn't in a cage." Ethan's throat tightened. "What did you see?" "I was in a forest with sunlight and birds," she said. "And I wasn't a monster. I was just ... M.E." He smiled sadly. "You still are." Then something strange happened. The lights flickered again. The force field hummed loudly, then shimmered and turned clear. Both of them froze. "No alarms?" Ethan whispered, glancing around. Nova looked shocked too. "It's never done that." He reached out slowly, uncertain. She did the same, claw to hand, soft touch to skin, and this time, there was no force between them. Their hands met, warm and real. She gasped quietly, as if she hadn't felt human skin in years. Ethan didn't flinch. She didn't burn him, didn't shock him, didn't freeze him. The cameras above sparked and went dark, one by one. "I think," Ethan said carefully, "you're learning to control it." Nova looked down at their hands, still joined, still calm. "I didn't even try," she said. "It just happened." He nodded slowly. "Maybe it's not the cage keeping you calm. Maybe it's me." Footsteps echoed from down the hall. Sharp and fast, Ethan pulled his hand back just in time as the force field blinked back to life. Nova retreated to her corner like nothing had happened. The door opened, and 2 guards stepped in. "Engineer Ethan, your presence was not logged," one of them said sternly. "I couldn't sleep," Ethan lied. "Just wanted to check on her." They didn't look convinced, but they didn't argue either. They let him out, and as he glanced back, he saw Nova watching him with something new in her eyes. Not sadness, not fear, but a quiet trust. Later that night, Ethan sat at his desk and opened his private log. He typed everything, every moment, every word. Then he paused, stared at the screen, and typed one more sentence. "She's not the weapon they made," he wrote. "She's becoming something else." In the shadows of her cell, Nova stared at the spot where their hands had touched. She placed her clawed fingers over her chest, feeling something strange inside, a warmth, a flicker, like the beginning of something lost long ago. She whispered his name again, not in fear, not in need, but like a promise to herself that she wouldn't let the world turn her cold again. Asterisk, a thunderstorm of silence passed over the station the next day. Every hallway felt tense, every officer walked faster than usual. But behind the thick glass of the observation room, Nova sat still. She no longer stared at the floor. She watched the door, waiting. Ethan didn't come that morning. Not at lunch, not even at lights out. Something felt wrong. Nova paced her small cell like a caged animal, not wild, but anxious. The warmth from last night had not left her. She could still feel his hand in hers, real and soft, not afraid. Hours passed, then a door opened across the lab. But it wasn't Ethan. Two scientists walked in, wearing dark uniforms and heavy gloves. They rolled in a floating machine covered in wires and glowing needles. Nova stepped back quickly, her eyes narrowing. "No," she whispered. "I don't want this." They didn't answer her. One tapped on a tablet while the other prepared. "The machine," I said. "No." Nova growled louder, her voice shaking the lights. "Begin scan." The scientist said coldly, "We have permission to push pain levels outside." In a locked chamber far from the lab, Ethan struggled against metal cuffs. They had detained him without warning, said he was interfering with research, said he was infected by the subject's influence. He screamed through the soundproof glass, begging to be let out. "No, you don't understand," he shouted. "She's changing, she's waking up." But no one listened. They only increased the sedative gas in his chamber. His vision blurred, and everything faded to white. Inside the cell, Nova screamed. The machine hummed louder, flashing lights into her eyes, sending pulses into her bones. She dropped to her knees, gripping her chest as if something inside was trying to rip free. "Stop," she gasped. "Stop it, please." But the men didn't stop. They only watched the data streaming across the screen. "She's adapting," one said. "Energy levels rising." "Push it," the other replied. "Let's see what she really is." Then it happened. The floor cracked beneath her, just slightly, but enough to make the machine beep. A thin ripple of violet light spread across the cell. The force field flickered, once, twice, then snapped back into place. Nova's body trembled, but she didn't fall. She stood slowly, eyes burning gold, hair lifting in a silent wave. "I said stop," she whispered again. But this time it echoed like thunder. The machine sparked, panels bursting into flames. The scientist stumbled backward, shields rising too late. Cameras went dark, alarms rang, and lockdown protocols slammed into place. From every level of the station, red lights spun wildly. One message repeated across speakers: "Containment breach detected. Subject 47 unstable." But she wasn't unstable. She was angry, and she was no longer afraid. Ethan opened his eyes to chaos. The cuffs were broken, no, melted. The air was thick with smoke, and distant explosions shook the walls. He forced himself up, stumbling toward the lab. Soldiers ran past him, yelling into radios, but none dared go near the observation wing. Ethan reached the main door and pressed his hand against the scanner. It buzzed red, then green, then opened with a hiss. Nova stood alone in the center of the cell. The force field was down, sparks flying from ruined emitters. Her body was glowing like a star ready to collapse, and yet her eyes calmed the moment they met his. "Nova," he whispered, breathless. She stepped toward him slowly. The machines were burning behind her, but she looked soft in the light. "I didn't mean to lose control," she said, her voice cracking. "They pushed too hard," he said, taking her hand. "But you're still here. I thought I was going to become what they said I was," she whispered. But I kept thinking about your hand. Footsteps approached, and Ethan turned to see a dozen armed guards aiming at her. Nova looked at them, then back at Ethan. Do I run? She asked. He shook his head slowly. No, you don't have to run anymore. He stepped in front of her again, just like before, and this time, instead of shouting, the commander lowered his weapon. He watched Nova with caution but also with confusion. She had the power to tear this station in half. He muttered, but she didn't. Ethan nodded. Because she's not what you made her. The lights flickered one last time and then steadied. No alarms, no violence. Just silence. Nova let go of Ethan's hand only for a moment to touch her own chest. Something was different inside. Something was healing. The stolen ship wobbled through the edge of the starfield, blinking like a wounded bird across the silence of space. Its hull was patched together with mismatched panels, wires trailing like tails of smoke behind it. But inside the cockpit, Nova sat quietly beside Ethan. Her hands rested on her lap, still glowing faintly from the energy she had released. The human ship's controls were strange to her, but she didn't touch anything. She only watched Ethan's face as he adjusted the ship's direction. He looked tired. More tired than she'd ever seen him, but he didn't complain. Not once. Do you think they're chasing us yet? She asked, voice soft and distant. Ethan gave a weak smile. They were chasing us before we left. Nova tilted her head. Then why does this feel different now? He thought about that, then answered, because now they're scared for the wrong reason. Nova looked out the window at the stars. I don't want to be hunted, she said. I want to be left alone. Ethan nodded. You won't. Be alone again. She turned to him slowly, unsure what that meant. But part of her didn't want to ask. Part of her just wanted to believe it. They landed on a quiet moon, covered in blue grass and sleeping hills. It was a forgotten place. One of the abandoned colonies from the old wars. Ethan had picked it for that reason. No patrols, no cities, no noise, only silence. They built a small shelter from the wrecked cargo. Nova helped, her hands quicker and steadier than his. She didn't complain when the wind was cold, or when the metal snapped her skin. She simply worked, like she had always been meant to build instead of destroy. And when it was done, they sat outside together under a sky with 2 moons. The stars above them didn't blink like eyes, they just listened. I used to believe pain was the only language people understood, Nova said after a long silence. Ethan didn't answer right away. She looked down, ashamed. But now I think maybe kindness is louder, she added. Ethan placed a hand near hers. Not quite touching, but close. I think kindness just takes longer to hear, he said. Nova finally smiled, small, uncertain, but real. The peace didn't last 3 nights. Later, the sky lit up with a silent explosion. A scout ship broke through the clouds, black and sleek, searching. Nova's heart dropped when she saw the red insignia on its wings. The same symbol burned into the walls of her old cage. She backed away into the trees, but Ethan grabbed her hand. Don't run, he whispered. Not this time. I'm not ready, she said, shaking. You are, he replied. I've seen it. The scout landed near the base of the hill. Doors sliding open, 3 figures stepped out in armored suits, their weapons humming. They scanned the area slowly, carefully. Nova stood behind the trees, eyes glowing again, breath shallow. Ethan stood in the open, arms raised. Don't shoot, he called out. She's not a threat. The soldiers didn't lower their guns. We're under orders to retrieve Subject 47, the lead said. She's not a subject, Ethan said, louder this time. She has a name. The lead stepped forward, eyes hidden behind a visor. We saw the station footage, he said. She destroyed equipment, injured staff. She was being tortured. Ethan replied, and she still didn't hurt anyone. Then Nova stepped out, not hiding, not glowing, just standing, with the wind in her hair and her hands open. I'm not here to fight, she said. Her voice steady but quiet. I won't go back in a cage, but I won't hurt you either. The soldiers looked at her, unsure. There was no rage in her eyes, no power swirling around her body. Only come, only control. One of them lowered his weapon. She doesn't look like a monster, he said under his breath. The lead hesitated, then spoke into his radio. Command. Visual confirmed subject is stable. There was silence, then static. Then a voice replied. Stand by. Nova turned to Ethan, whispering. They're not leaving. I know, he said. But maybe they're not here to capture you either. She didn't believe it yet, but she stayed where she was. Unmoving, unafraid, a light appeared on the scout ship, signaling retreat. The soldiers slowly turned and walked back without another word. No chains, no shots, no threats. Just silence again, as the ship rose into the sky. Nova stood frozen. She felt like she had held her breath the whole time. When it was gone, she collapsed to her knees. Ethan ran to her, catching her before she fell completely. I didn't run, she whispered. I stayed. I know, he said, and you were perfect in that moment. Nova didn't feel like a weapon or an escapee. She felt something closer to human than she'd ever dared to feel. And Ethan just held her, knowing something had changed. Forever, asterisk, the recording spread faster than wildfire across the outer colonies. A quiet video, shaky and grainy, showed Nova standing still with her hands raised. No weapons, no glowing powers. Just calm words and soft eyes, and in the background, the voice of a human saying, she has a name. Within hours, every black market screen and back alley come link had replayed it. At first, no one believed it. Then they watched again, slower. This time, and for the first time in years, the galaxy looked at her face and didn't flinch. Some were confused, others were angry, but many were curious. The question whispered everywhere was the same. Is the monster really just a girl? On the quiet moon where Nova and Ethan stayed, they didn't know how far the story had traveled. They only knew the stars seemed closer lately. Nova walked through the tall grass each morning, bare feet brushing against dew. The sky was always soft here, not harsh like the station lights. She began drawing symbols in the dirt with sticks, old symbols from a language she barely remembered. And when Ethan asked her what they meant, she smiled and said, pieces of home, but peace is fragile. And silence never lasts. One night, they heard a strange sound music. It came from the forest, soft and haunting. Not human music, but alien in rhythm and pattern. Nova stood up slowly, her eyes scanning the trees. That sound, she whispered. It's from my kind. They followed it through the dark, Ethan carrying a light, Nova moving silently beside him. They found a woman waiting by the river. She had silver markings on her skin and the same glowing eyes as Nova, but her expression was cold, sharp, like ice wrapped in fire. Nova, the woman said, her voice smooth but hollow. Nova didn't speak, her body stiff, her claws curling. Slowly, Ethan stood beside her, watching carefully. You survived, the woman continued. They said you were broken. I was, Nova said softly, but I fixed myself. The woman stepped forward, never blinking. I am Commander Sira, she said, sent by the Prime Cluster to recover what was lost. I am not lost, Nova replied. I chose to leave. You belong to us, Sira said. You were built for war, perfected by science, improved by pain. Nova took a step back, her hands shaking. I'm not a weapon anymore, she said. I'm a person, Ethan. Moved between them without thinking. She doesn't belong to anyone, he said. She's free. Sira looked at him with disgust. A human, she spat. You think your touch changed her? I don't think, Ethan said calmly. I know it did. Nova reached out and touched his shoulder gently. Her hand was warm, calm. I changed because I wanted to, she said. He just helped me see who I really was. Sira didn't speak for a moment. Then she turned away, pulling a device from her coat. Your face is spreading across the networks, she said. Some see you as hope, others see you as a threat. Nova looked down. What do you see? Sira answered. I see something unstable. I see a girl pretending to be harmless until she forgets how dangerous she truly is. She dropped the device on the ground, where it projected a hologram. It showed several alien leaders arguing. On screens, some wanted Nova destroyed, others wanted her studied. But one voice, an older alien, said, "She may become something greater than all of us." Sierra ended the projection and stared at Nova. "You can run, you can hide, you can even try to be normal," she said. "But the galaxy will come for you eventually." Nova said nothing. She just watched the stars between the trees. And then she spoke with a voice steady as stone. "If the galaxy comes for me, then I'll face it." Sierra didn't argue again. She disappeared into the night like a ghost made of silver and silence. Nova and Ethan walked back through the grass, neither speaking for a long time. When they reached the shelter, Ethan sat beside her and said, "Are you okay?" Nova closed her eyes, breathing deeply. "I don't know what's coming," she said, "but I'm not afraid of it anymore." In the distance, lightning flashed across the hills, but it wasn't stormlight. It was the glow of ships entering orbit. Nova looked up, eyes glowing gently in the dark. "I think the world is about to meet me," she whispered. "Not the weapon they fear, but the woman I choose to be." The sky was full of stars, but none of them were still. Dozens of ships floated in orbit, like metal birds circling their prey. Some were military, some were news vessels, and a few were watchers, silent, powerful, unknown. Below, on the soft blue grass of the quiet moon, Nova stood barefoot under the twin moons. She didn't hide, didn't run, didn't glow with rage. She just stood still, watching the sky. Her claws were retracted, her hair loose in the breeze. Beside her, Ethan placed a hand on her back without fear. The world had come for her, just as Sierra had warned. She didn't tremble, not anymore. The time for hiding was over, but she also didn't raise her hands to fight. She whispered something to Ethan, just 2 words. "Be ready." He nodded, and then walked toward the shelter to activate the signal beacon, the one they had repaired days ago, the one that had only one purpose, to send a message. Nova closed her eyes and reached inward, not to unleash destruction, but to center herself. Inside her chest, the fire that once felt like chaos now pulsed like a heartbeat. Steady, strong, hers. She felt the eyes of the world above her, watching, judging, waiting. When the ships began landing, she walked toward them without waiting for permission. The first one to open revealed a circle of leaders, alien delegates, military minds, and nervous diplomats. They all stared at her with caution, some with fear, a few with open hatred. No one spoke, until an older alien with cracked skin and white eyes stepped forward. "You are the weapon they built," he said, his voice sharp. "You carry the power to erase cities." Nova nodded. Slowly, "I know. And yet," the alien said, frowning, "you come to us without chains, without demands." "I came because I'm tired of being feared," she said. "And because I finally have something to protect," the crowd murmured. Some surprised, others amused. A younger voice shouted, "What do you want from us, praise? Forgiveness?" Nova shook her head. "I want the truth to be known. I was made in a lab shaped by war, twisted into something none of you could control. But I am not that creature anymore." She looked toward Ethan in the distance, who stood silently by the signal tower. "I found someone who saw me, not the claws, not the glow, not the threat, but the person underneath." One of the officials scoffed. "And what are you now, girl? A hero?" Nova smiled faintly. "No, I am what your fear created," she said. "But I chose not to become what you expected." Another voice spoke, this one uncertain. "Can you prove it?" She stepped forward slowly, lifted her hand into the air. Her body began to glow, but softly, not in anger, not in chaos. The grass around her lit up gently, flowers blooming from the ground under her feet. Where she once brought destruction, she now spread life. The glow around her pulsed like a soft sunrise, and every ship watching from above broadcasted the moment to every planet tuned in. Ethan stepped forward beside her and offered his hand. Nova looked at it, then took it. not with fear, but with trust. Together, they stood before the galaxy. The girl once locked in chains and the human who dared to touch her. There was no cheering, no music, no dramatic ending. Just silence, and then understanding. A leader finally stepped forward and said, "Then let this be recorded. She is no longer the weapon. She is Nova, and she chooses peace." One by one, the ships lifted back into the sky. No shots fired, no walls built, no cages returned. The stars watched them. Silent witnesses to something new. Nova looked up and breathed deeply. "I think this is what freedom feels like," she whispered. Ethan smiled beside her. "You earned it." And as they walked back through the glowing field under the twin moons, the galaxy, for the first time, didn't fear her. It listened, it watched, and maybe, just maybe, began to hope again.